It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video. Today we're going to talk about URBackup, which is a server and client backup solution. It's actually a pretty nice solution, and you can run it in Docker, you can run it straight up on your host, just kind of however you want to do it. There's lots of different ways to do it. We're going to set it up in Docker today because I feel like that's an easier way to get things going initially, at least. If you feel like tackling the metal install, the on-host install, you should go out there and try it. They have some pretty good instructions on how to do that as well. But the nice thing about URBackup is it runs that server. It's got a web interface for setting up your server, and then you actually go and install your client systems on like Windows or Linux, and those things kind of reach out to the network, and the server broadcasts itself, and those things automatically find it, or it automatically finds the clients, and then you can set up what things you want to back up from those clients to URBackup, and it does it on a schedule. So it's really kind of a nice system for backups, and backups are so important. I just can't stress enough, and I've talked about this in the past, but I really want to stress how important backups are of your systems. And especially when you start getting into self-hosting, it's really important to back up your self-hosted systems because things happen. Things that are beyond your control happen. Hurricanes happen, floods happen, tornadoes happen, lightning storms happen, fires happen, life happens, unfortunately, and it's just so many things that are out of our control. The one thing that is in our control is backups. So setting up a good backup strategy can save you so much time and so much grief and so much effort. And I have learned this the hard way. Please do not learn this the hard way. I'm trying to help you by letting you learn from my mistakes. And lots of sysadmins, lots of people in this profession will tell you that they have learned this the hard way. And the hard way, when you're a professional in a job, can cost you your job. So if you happen to learn this lesson at home, at least it didn't cost you your job probably, but it could cost you money, it could cost you time, it could cost you precious photos, it could cost you all kinds of things that took you hours or years to collate and get together and put together as far as data goes. There's so much, there's just so much about backing up that you should really take seriously, and I want to give you some tools to do that. So I'll have other tools for backing up as well. But really the backup strategy that I still follow today is the 3-2-1 strategy. Now there's different ways of defining this, but the main one that I see is no less than 3 physical copies in no less than 2 physical different locations at least once per week. Now you could set that as once per day, once per hour, once per year, depending on how you want to look at it. But when I say 2 different physical locations, I mean, like in my house is separate from my office that I do all my work in, and they're separated by about 30 feet. Now that might be enough, but if it's a fire and it's a windy day, it's probably not going to be enough. The fire is going to take out my little office back here too. If it's a flood, that's not going to be enough. You really want to have like separate geographical locations, and that's where the cloud comes into play. And if you want some good cloud storage that's not expensive, you can shop around out there. I think AWS actually has some decently priced cloud storage, but there may be some out there that are better and less expensive than AWS. But seriously, when you're backing up, even if you just say, you know what, friend who lives in another city, or friend who lives in another state, or friend who lives in another country, as long as you're not breaking any laws of those countries or states, you know, ask them, say, hey, you've got a server and I've got a server, and we've both got lots of space and we both have lots of things to back up. How about you back up your stuff to my server and I'll back up my stuff to your server, and if anything tragic ever happens to one of us, hopefully it's not to both of us at the same time, and the other one of us still has that person's data, at least from the last backup we made. That's a way to keep it out of the cloud, keep it local, hopefully with somebody you trust, and it's still a really great strategy for having 2 physically, geographically different locations where your backups are happening. So you could use URBackup for that through a VPN. Totally possible as well. We're not going to cover that today. Today I just want to help you get the container set up and installed and show you how to install a couple of clients, and then we're going to move on. So we'll get into that right after this. I just want to say thank you so much to all of my patrons over at Patreon and all of my subscribers on YouTube. It just means so much to me that you guys subscribe, that the patrons go over and actually give me a little bit of money every month for my efforts. I truly cannot even start to tell you how much I appreciate that. If you'd like to support the channel, go over to patreon.com. I'll have a link in the description and the show notes. Truly, I appreciate everything you guys do, and I appreciate you so much for watching the videos. So like that video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and click that bell so you get notifications when new videos come out. And bring your friends along for the journey as well. Alright, if we go out here to Dockerhub, we'll find a backup server for URBackup image that is called URBackup server. And if you go down, it shows that if you get the latest tag, it should pull the latest version of URBackup. And he does give you just a Docker run file, which is pretty nice, pretty easy to kind of just get started and get going. But if we move down a little bit, he's got a Docker compose file and even says, hey, this will work with Portainer. This is version 2, so he may have even been talking about an older version of Portainer, because I believe the newer versions of Portainer will do version 3 as well, but you can use version 2. So he's got a nice little Docker compose file that we'll actually use. And he says if you want to build it locally, here's some things that you can do to do this as well. So you can go out there and check that out. He's going to have a link to GitHub over here on the right. If you want to just click on that and open it up, it'll take you over to his GitHub repository. So if you click on that link, it brings you over to his repository over here on GitHub, and you can kind of see what he's got going on. But you can pull down this repository, you can make changes, you can make a build yourself, everything like that. But he's got AMD 64, i386, ARM HF, ARM 64, AArch 64 Docker images that you can use for this backup server. So if you're running Raspberry Pi and you want to run this thing, you can. If you're running other ARM architectures and you've got this ARM architecture that he's got covered here, then you can run it for sure. If you're running AMD 64 or Intel i386 32-bit, you can also run this image. So it's really awesome that you can do all of those things, that he's got it building for those things. So just be aware of that. Again, he's got the instructions on running this for either Docker Compose or Docker here, just like you saw over on the Dockerhub website. So either way, you can get this information and get things set up. And we're going to kind of talk about what we need to do to prepare for this. So out of the gate, this is a backup system. So you want to make sure that you're allocating some space or a volume where you're going to have the backup files be stored. And that's really important, because you're setting up a backup system, and if you're setting up a backup system to back up terabytes of data, you want to have that storage space already set up. So we'll go through that here in just a minute. I'm going to use Proxmox with a VM to do it. You don't have to do that. In fact, I'll be using it mostly in Ubuntu, not through a VM. Actually, it's going to be a VM of Ubuntu, and then we're going to just run this on Docker on top of it. But we're going to set up a folder that we can then allocate for our backups inside of that Ubuntu system. But yeah, it's the same concept. You just want to set up some folders and then kind of basically map those things into your Docker container so that you've got space for those backup files. If you want to map the www folder, he also gives you the option to do that. I don't know that I need to do that unless I wanted to get in there and tweak something about it, but I don't think we need to. So we're going to skip that one for now, and if we need to, we'll come back and add it in later. But right now, we're going to go set up our folders. Now, there's two ways that you can do this. If you have this running on something with a desktop interface, you can do this through the desktop GUI. There's no reason not to do that. I'm going to do this to the CLI just because my Ubuntu install is a Ubuntu server, so it's headless. But you can just SSH over. So once you've authenticated in with your SSH, I'm going to make this just a little bit larger for you guys. We're just going to make a new folder. So I'm here in my home directory. So if I do pwd, you can see where you're at. So I'm in /home/Brian. So I'm actually going to go ahead and create a URBackup folder first. So I'm just going to say make directory, and then URBackup, and then I'm going to cd into that. And inside of this folder, I'm going to create just a data folder. So I'm just going to call this mkdir data, and then mkdir storage. So those will be slightly different things. Just in case we need both, I'm going to have both. So if I do an ls, you can see that I've got those set up. And then the final thing I'm going to do is create a Docker compose file. So I'm going to do nano docker-compose.yml. So this is the name of the file that we need. And that's going to open this up. Now I'm going to go back into my browser. Alright, we're going to go back to the browser here, and we're just going to grab this Docker Compose file that he's put together for us, which is really great. So we're just going to grab all of this, and we're going to scroll just a little bit to make sure we get everything. I'm going to hit Control-C to copy that, and then back over here in my terminal, I'm going to do Control-Shift-V like Victor to paste that in. I'm going to get rid of these extra spaces here. Make sure there's an end return there. Everything looks good there. And I'm going to scroll back to the top, and we'll just kind of go through this thing. So he says, pull down this version, which is the latest image available. That's great. That's going to be the image it's going to pull from Dockerhub. It's going to be called URBackup when it comes up. If we're using Portainer or if using Docker PS, you'll see it as URBackup. It's going to restart on its own unless you stop it for some reason, which is great. And then this PUID is 1000, PGID is 100, and it says enter the user ID and the group ID of the user who should own the files here. So if you want to know what that is, we'll go look at it here in just a second. and we'll change those if we need to. So we're going to go to time zone. My time zone is not Europe, Berlin, so it's America/Chicago for me. You should figure out what your time zone is and put in the correct time zone. That can really help with backups because it gets time and date stamps, things like that correct for you, which helps. Then path to your database folder. And then he's got var/URBackup. And then path to your backup folder. So here, we're just going to do /data. And over here, and the / just means from where I'm at and data. And then /storage. And then remember he says uncomment this line if you want to bind mount basically the www folder. We don't need to. So I'm just going to skip that for now. Now this part is kind of important. Network mode equals host. This runs on a port that's like 55414 or 54541 or I don't know. It's something out there. We'll see it here in a minute. It says it on his web page. So it should be a port that's not going to have a conflict for you, but if it does, you may need to do something different. But running this as network mode equals host means that we can use basically our clients can be discovered on our main LAN network, and the server is going to be usable on the main LAN network without having to do any mapping of ports and things like that. So this is probably the best way to run it. So we're just going to leave it as host the way that he has it right here. And then if you want to have ButterFS support for this, you need to activate these two lines here, which says the capability you want to add and then sysadmin. So we can go ahead and do that. We can just uncomment this just to have it. Make sure you've got the spacing correct here. There we go. This is YAML, so spacing does matter. So I'm just going to do a Control-O to save that, and we're going to exit real quick and go check out what our user information is. So if you ever want to see what the user information is, you're going to do cat/etc. You're going to do cat/etc/passwd, and this is going to basically cat out your password file for you. And what you're really looking for is for your user in this case. So we're looking for the user that says Brian. So right here you can see the user that says Brian, and my user's group ID and person and user ID are both 1000. It's not 1100 like he has listed. So we're going to go ahead and change that inside of that folder to be 1100, just like 1000 and 1000, so that it's set up correctly. And we will go and basically just clear this out and nano Docker compose one more time, and we'll just come down here and right here for the group ID, that is also 1000 in my case. So I'm going to do Control-O, Enter, and Control-X. Now everything should be set up the way that we need. Yeah, so right here he says once we run this thing, we should be able to access the web interface on port 55414. So what we did was we set the database folder as our /data that we created inside of there. And then we set our storage folder for our backups as /storage. And that's really just those two folders that we created inside of this directory structure that are already here. So we just told it put our database info here and put our storage files here. And then here's our Docker compose file. So we're just going to run this. We're going to do Docker compose up. And you can do -d to run this as a daemon, which means it's going to run and then it's going to tell you everything's done, and then it'll have the terminal prompt there again. And you won't see any log messages. But if we do this without the -d, we can actually run it the first time just to see the log output and make sure nothing went wrong, and we can kind of see that. Now if you have Portainer, you can run it with -d and then go into Portainer and just check the logs, or you can do docker-compose logs and just kind of rerun that same command over and over and watch the logs that way. But for me, it's just as easy to do this and then just basically run it with a -d afterwards. So we're going to let it run. It's going to go out and pull this down first thing. Alright, it hasn't done anything in about a minute, so I'm going to assume that it might be done. Now, maybe it's still doing some things in the background, but let's see if we can access the web user interface here. So we're just going to go back into our browser, open up a new tab here, and we'll put in the IP address of our server. And we want port 55414. And here we go. We got URBackup, and it is up and running here. Now, I'm not super familiar with the interface, so we're going to go through this together. So here you can see a list where our computer names should come up whenever we start adding clients. We have activities. We have backups. We have logs. We have statistics. So once we actually start going out and getting some stuff going on. We'll have some statistics we can look at, and then we do have settings. So settings is always kind of a good place to start before we really do anything else. So you can see the backup path is backups. That's inside of the container, and that should be in our storage folder inside of our host system, so we can still access that data. So right here on the server page, you've got quite a few things that you can actually run. So there's a server URL if you want to put that in. I don't think we need that right this second, but we'll kind of check it out and figure out what we need. Do not do image backups. So if you don't want to do image backups of basically images and things, you can check this box. If you don't want to do file backups, again, check this box. You can automatically shut down the server if you want to when backups are done. So you want them to download the client from your backup server or your update server. Show when a new server version is available, so I'd leave that checked as well. And then auto update the clients. I think that's a great feature. It's probably worth letting it run, and if you see issues with it, you could always come uncheck it and save the settings after that. Here it says how many simultaneous backups, 100, you know, how many clients active, 10,000, that's a lot of clients. Times for when this thing should be doing the most work is between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. and then 3 to 4 I believe is maybe p.m., but you can kind of change this to what you want. Automatically back up the URBackup database is checked. I would leave that checked as well. And then whether you want speed limits on your network, you could set that, but I'm going to leave it disabled right now. It doesn't seem like it's going to bother me if I use it. We'll see how much it actually uses. And then your soft quota is 95% of the space that you've got available. So you can do incremental file backups, and the basically time between file backups will be every 5 minutes. Or sorry, every 5 hours is what they have set right now. You can disable it if you don't want it to do that. You can also set an interval for full file backups. Currently that's set for 30 days. So if you want the entire file to be backed up a second time, you can set that for whatever you want instead of doing the incremental backups this way. I think it saves a lot of space to kind of run things the way that you see it here, but again, you can disable that if you want to. The maximum number of incremental file backups to keep, 100, which I think is pretty decent. If you've made 100 different changes, you know, each one caught at 5 hours time difference, you're talking about 500 hours of span there where you've made changes. You probably would be safe to go back to that, but if you wanted more, you can add more, and depending on how much space you have for that, feel free to adjust that. Maximum number of incremental file backups, minimum number of incremental file backups, 40. Maximum number of full file backups is 10, and again, minimum number of full file backups is 2. So you can exclude files, include files, and so on. So some more good settings there for your file backups. You do have image backups as well, so you can do full images basically. So you've got 7 days, 60 days. You've got some different limits set here. So very similar to what we saw on the file side, but just limits for images instead. So kind of take note of that, make changes where you feel like it's necessary for your system. And then the image backup format. So if you want to do full images like that, you can also kind of jump down here and say, how do I want to store this? Do I want it to be compressed VHD or VHD? So it's virtual hard disk basically. I would say compressed because that's going to save some space for you. You do have permissions as well, so you can kind of go through here and set different permissions depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So basically this is all permissions about what the client side of URBackup can do. So if you're running this for a business or something like that, you may not want to give those permissions to the client side, so you might want to go through there and uncheck the ones that you don't want the client side to be able to do and would rather the server side kind of have control of. So just kind of make note of that as well. So here on the client, you can say delay after the system starts up before it starts trying to do a backup. So depending on what you're running and how you're doing that, you know, for Windows you might say like I want to wait, you know, 15 minutes, something like that. For Linux you might want to say I want to wait 10 minutes, something like that. You know, in this case I'm just going to put like 3 minutes just so it'll kind of have a little bit of a delay no matter what I'm running. So you can kind of set that up the way that you need to, but you know, whenever things are first starting up especially, sometimes it takes a little longer for things to get started, so you may not want to start your backup right away. You might want to give it a little time. Again, you've got your backup window setting. You've got your network speed setting, so you can limit network speed if you need to on the client side as well, and then also you can say whether you want to run the updates on the client side silently, so you could check this box if you do. If you don't, if you want people to know that they got an update, just leave it unchecked, that's fine. And then again, the soft client quota, so you can set that here if you want to. So the way you do archives is kind of set up in here as well. So you can set up how many days, archive every how many days, archive for how many days. What is the archive window? So again, you can go and set up those times where the archive should be running. The backup type, which is file backup, incremental file backup, full file backup, image backup, incremental image backup, and full image backup. So you have a lot of choices there for setting that up. And then if you have volume letters, so if you're running this off of Windows, you can set up volume letters as well. So you can set up some alerts as well. So if you're having issues, you can kind of go through here and set up the things that you want to be alerted about, which is pretty great. You can enable internet mode. I'm not really sure if that means like backing up across the internet, but it does say that it requires a server restart. You might want to kind of set up some other things like internal server name and IP. Internet server name and IP, and then internet server port. This is something that I would not personally feel comfortable doing. I would rather use a VPN or something like that to kind of make this connection and do this. But if you're interested in doing it, go through, kind of check out what the settings are and try to set it up. It's not something I'm going to cover today. And then finally, you have advanced settings here that you can kind of go through and check out as well. So temporary files, just all kinds of things here that you can kind of say, you know, do this or don't do this. Go through and set up your advanced settings. Really check out all of the settings. It's important that you get these things set up before you start doing backups, because it can save you a lot of backup effort, a lot of backup space, everything else. So kind of make sure you've checked that before you get going too far along. I'm going to leave pretty much all of those things as default except for that little time of whenever it starts up. So I'm going to click save just to save my changes. There's really nothing special about it. It just tells you down here you did it, it was saved successfully, so you should get that. So that's our general. We have mail, so we also have mail settings. So in here we can set up our mail server information. So if you're going to be expecting to get alerts, you're going to need to set up your email information here. You're going to set up your server SMTP, your port, all of your different information about how you authenticate and things like that, whether it's TLS or SSL, and so on, so that you can have email going out. If you have LDAP set up and you want to get set up for LDAP on here so that your users and your clients can basically set up through LDAP, you can set that up here. So here's the LDAP information that you'd want to set. All right, now that we've gone through settings, let's go get a client set up. And I'm actually going to start up a virtual machine here. All right, so I've got a Windows virtual machine set up here running Windows 10. I'm just going to kind of expand my browser here out to full screen. And we will go to URBackup. And we're going to click on getting the URBackup client. And you can see it already picked an exe for Windows here. So we're just going to say download. We're going to say save that file. And then on Windows, you go into your File Explorer here. Jump over to Downloads. And then here's our URBackup download. We're just going to double click that thing. And of course, we're going to tell it yes. And I do want English, but you do have other language options if you need to choose another language. So just be aware of that. And we're just going to run through our standard Windows installer wizard here. And now we're going to click finish. So here we can see that we've got the little pop-up that says please select the files that you want to back up. So we're going to stop right here for just a second. I'm going to go back to the browser. And I want to refresh and see if my machine actually shows up here, because I don't know that it's actually found my backup server. So I don't know if I just want to make sure that I know what order this thing goes in as to where it actually finds things. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a control F5 here. Yeah, so it doesn't show that it's got a machine yet. Well, Windows is being a bit of an embarrassment in this case. It does not seem to be able to find this server, so we'll move on. And I'll move on to something that's actually on my network. I just don't run a Windows machine natively on my network, so let's do one with Linux here. Alright, so I originally had some issues getting the Windows virtual machine that I have set up to be recognized by URBackup. And I had to dig and do some searching and things like that, but I did figure out what the problem was. And while the Windows firewall was not on, I do have a VPN client that has its own firewall, and apparently even though the VPN client was disconnected, the firewall was still on for that VPN client, and it was affecting the way that Windows was communicating with my network. So I'm not really sure why that was happening, but once I turned it off and restarted the URBackup service inside of Windows, it connected, and now I get a little a little green icon down here for the URBackup service thing that runs there. And I can close my services, but it's now backing up, so you can see here on Firefox that it's actually running the backup. It may be done already, I don't know. I think it kind of runs live, I can't remember, but you can see that it's now backing up my downloads folder, which is what I told it I wanted it to back up. So it's backing up the downloads folder to my server. And then here you can see that while this was yesterday that I did the first part of the video, you can see that it's been running my backup for my Linux machine incrementally like it should. So I've got some information now, I've got some logs now that I can see what's going on here. So if we go back to the URBackup page, you'll see here with the different clients, they have different ways of doing this. So you do have a bootable restore CD USB disk. What I'm going to go to is this Linux binary. So we're going to copy this script right here, just copy. And I'm going to go open up my terminal again. And actually, we're going to stop this real quick. We're going to do Control-C. I'm going to bring it up with -D. So that's just going to, basically, I stopped the container. I'm restarting the container. No big deal. I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to exit from that server. And now I'm going to paste that script in. I'm going to hit enter so it'll run. It's going to go download it. It's going to ask for my password because it's going to install some software. It asks if you want to proceed with the client install. Just hit Y and then enter. Let's see. So it says successfully started the client service. Installation complete. Detected no Btrfs file system. Detected LVM volumes. Please select the snapshot mechanism to be used for backups. So they have LVM, Logical Volume Manager snapshots, or use no snapshot mechanism. So you have kind of two choices. So I'm going to say 2. I'm going to hit enter, and it says configure snapshot mechanism via user local /etc URBackup, and then snapshot config. And then it gives us a little bit of a bash error, so there's a syntax error, unexpected token with an open parenthesis. So if we hit our up arrow, we can kind of see, oh, yeah, I just added a bunch of extra text that we didn't actually need for the install. So you really just need the first 2 lines in there. That's all it was. So that's no big deal. Okay, so we should have that running now. Let's go back and see if it actually found our server. And if we refresh, yeah, so you can see here's my Linux client now that's running, and you can see that right now it hasn't ever backed up. So remember, it has like a 3-minute timer. It has certain times of days that it'll do this. But now it's found my system, and it's going to start trying to do those things from my system. So from here I can select the file with the check mark, and then I can click here, and you see I get some options about what I want to do. So I can just say full file backup, or I can do an image backup, so on and so forth. I can also do the remove client, full image backup, incremental image backup, so on. So I've never done any backups, so doing the incrementals probably wouldn't be a good idea because there's nothing incremental to do except it's just going to do a full backup. I do want to select some different files from my Linux system that I would want it to back up, so I'm not really sure how to do that with URBackup in this case, so we're going to have to kind of dig in a little bit here. Now they do have documentation, which is going to be useful, so if you jump over documentation, you can set up backup and restore specific applications. Okay, so in order to set up a backup path for the URBackup for Linux, you're going to use the CLI. So you use sudo URBackup client CTL, add -backup dir, so backup dir, and then -d, and then give it the full path to the directory that you want to back up. Now you can do this multiple times to add multiple directories, or you can use a directory that encompasses all the directories that you want. So basically your home folder normally is what you would want. In this case I went all the way down to the downloads folder just so it'll do that one. And then we'll see whenever this runs what it looks like. But really there's not a lot to it. It's not very difficult to set that up, and you've kind of got things ready to run for URBackup. So I'm just going to click on the down arrow here. I'm going to pick full file backup. Now this should set up our backup to start going. And it says starting backup failed on our Windows side. I'm not sure why. We'll go check out our Windows machine and see if we see any messages over here on that side. Alright, so I refreshed it here. You can see that my Dell is actually pushing the backup stuff over. But you can see that there is some great potential here, I think, with the auto discovery, you know, from the Linux side at least. It was really great. I appreciate that they did that and went to that trouble to make that happen. I wish they had a little bit of a GUI for URBackup on the Linux side. I know that you know, historically Linux has been a CLI kind of group, but honestly, the world is changing and we like to click too. So definitely get us some clicky stuff, please, there, URBackup. This is a really great tool. It's a really great system. I've been putting this off for a long time because I just didn't feel like tackling it. It's really not too bad. Getting the server set up and running was super easy with that Docker image, and then using the host network information is the smart way to go, in my opinion, because that's going to save you some trouble in the long run. And then getting my Linux system on board here was just copy that command and paste it in the terminal and let it run, and then giving it a single command to set up the folder that I wanted to back up. If you want to back up everything, just set it at /. Again, use sudo to do that, and you're ready to go. But please, whatever you do, pick a backup strategy, get it out there, make it work. I think I'm going to need to leave URBackup up and running, and I'll set it up on the rest of my Linux machines as well so that I can have some backups here on my system. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.